I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there any public comment this evening? Any public comment? I don't believe we have any public, so moving on to next on our agenda, I want to welcome Keith Rosenfeld and Savannah Nicole Talalba. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you so much for taking time to join us this evening. I very much appreciate it, as I know our other members, Chris and Fred, do. It doesn't look like our fourth member, Bob, is with us this evening, but he's also a member on the Tax Incentive Committee. So thank you. Have you both, I presume, had a chance to look over what we currently have for the town of Seymour?
Yes, we both received copies.
Okay, great. So we are all super excited to hear what you have to say and what you think is important to change, any feedback that you have.
Would you like to start, SN? And then I'll follow up with what you're saying.
Yeah, so thank you for having us. We really appreciate being here and being able to share our perspective as your land use, as members of your land use team. And so while our comments are small in scope, I think that they kind of are really related to where our expertise lies. And so one thing, and Keith, were you able to look into the first thing that I brought up with you earlier?
Yes,
Okay.
we had a discussion earlier in the day concerning those land uses that you've identified within the policy, and that would be under. Let me just see if I can see this with the light here. That would be under.
Yeah, I can fill it in.
Okay.
Yeah, let me give the background and then you can Keith did the research. So the first thing we were looking at is, as Keith said in B1, that the number 2, the proposed project must be located in an appropriate zone as defined by the town of Seymour zoning regulations. So our natural progression is to think about what uses that you are all considering. And you outline them in B1. So you go from manufacturing, retail, commercial office, information technology, research and development, and so forth. And so in the preamble and purpose, you state that you are looking for these properties and uses to be in your general business and industrial districts. And so as land use people, we read things very literally. And so we wanted to be sure that all of those uses were allowed in the 2 zones you specifically call out. And were they, Keith? Were there any that?
Yes, under both general business as well as industrial, as well as possibly within a mixed use district, an overlay district. You would find the mixed uses of retail, office, IT, restaurants, entertainment, recreation. We don't have much room for marinas and hospitality. And in industrial, you'll find manufacturing, research, development, warehousing, distribution, and storage. The only thing that has not listed is a new use that will be incorporated. We are actually making a new set of zoning regulations in the last year. They're going to public hearing soon with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we've added assisted living as a land use. That is not something that we have under our land use definitions at the moment.
So if you don't mind, I just want to make sure we're all understanding. You don't have a problem with B1 with the exception of how disappointing that you don't see commercial marina fitting into Seymour, but we could probably remove that, right? And we should include assisted living. Is that correct?
Yes, that is existing in the policy now. We just have to add it as a land use. It's not quite a land use in the town right now. It has to be identified and placed in the regulations. But as of now, this would be a good use for that kind of land use.
Okay, so you're actively working to have that added, though. If we were to add it here,
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
Yeah. And I guess our broad comment is whatever uses you outline, uh, feel free to email us, feel free to call us if you add more so that we can just make sure that they're consistent with the zones that you reference in the preamble and purpose. That doesn't mean that that can't be expanded. Maybe it would be beneficial for the commission to review the draft use table to see what sort of uses are allowed. If there's some that you want to include in the tax incentive policy, there's nothing that says you might want to expand. And so we just want to be sure that those two areas are consistent with one another.
I'm sorry, Savannah, Nicole, it's Savannah Nicole, right?
Yeah.
You want to be included with any land use charts? Is that what you were saying? I couldn't write quick enough. I'm so sorry.
No worries. I was going off of Keith's point where we're working on rewriting the zoning regulations. And so it might be useful to see the different types of uses that are outlined there. You have a bunch here that are effective for tax incentive policies, but Keith is illuminating that assisted living is a new one, assisted living facilities that you might want to include, but that might not be the only use you'd like to include in this policy. So
Okay.
if it would be good for the commission, we can work with Stephen to get you a draft version of the relevant sections that talk about the different type of uses, so that if the subcommittee wants to expand to other uses, you have a list of what we're kind of allowing for, what we're showing applicants, community members as uses they could do in the town.
Okay,
So,
that would be fantastic if you could share. Wonderful.
yeah, definitely. We can coordinate with Stephen.
Sure. But you don't see anything other than this one that you're adding right at this point that's blatantly missing
Exactly.
from what you're looking to do.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
I would also say, to add to that point, SN and I had a conversation, or have had some conversations over the time period concerning this, on identifying those land uses to determine what level of what regulatory pathway they are currently taking. Many of these uses have that you've listed are probably allowed either as a site plan, which is as I take a couple steps back, in order to get a building permit, you need a certificate or a zoning compliance permit. And those compliance permits are at different levels. Some are given as a right or administratively. Others are given within the contents of providing a site plan, which if the individuals meet the goals and those technical levels of the site plan, are allowed to continue and get a building permit. And then there are uses that allow for or require, a public hearing, public input, more serious mapping, more serious environmental investigations. And we want to look at and then interact with this committee to determine what uses you've prioritized, and then see if we can adjust or change some of those levels of scrutiny. The ones that you want the most might need the least amount of scrutiny, and the ones that are kind of controversial or might lend to various different views of it, we could lead and create them as more of a special permit or a higher scrutinized land use. And I think we fit in that way as well to your process.
So you're looking for, you want our committee to prioritize. You don't want to share your opinions on where you think those priorities.
Well, we will
Yes.
over time, but
Okay.
we want, once we open up, if we do expand the list of uses, then we can work and help you, enable you to have your input in as well as our input in order to create those levels of priority.
Yeah, and if I may, Keith, add on to
Yes.
that. As subcommittee members, it's your community, and part of being a planner is to help support you make the land use decisions that best suit the community. So we would definitely add our input if you wanted to lower a level of discretionary permitting that wouldn't be advisable from a land use perspective. So it's helpful for us in our process to first see all the ones you really want, all the ones that you're a little hesitant towards, and then we can say, it's consistent with what you have. Well, maybe I know you really want this one, but changing the level of permitting isn't the best way to go about that. And so we can help make the land use regulations consistent with the goals of the tax incentive policy. It won't be perfect, but we can get them closer in alignment so that when someone comes in and wants to use this policy, they don't feel that they're facing a regulatory blockage when they go to land use to get their permitting.
Okay. So I hope I'm not adding pressure or anything. I don't mean that, but so we're looking to make changes here and then recommend something to the overall Board of Selectmen with those changes. Not that it cannot reconvene as things move on, but it's not like a permanent standing committee. We're trying to improve on it now. So as the two of you are working towards adding some of these new land uses, what is your time frame? So should we be kind of cleaning some of this up and then re-meeting with you to see if what we're going to recommend is in alignment, or is what you're doing right now more of a long-term project?
Keith, if I may give it a shot.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, so I think the best way that we can support you is we have these, most of these uses that you've called out in 1B are already established land uses in the town of Seymour. And so Keith brought up an example of a land use that is being redefined, being established in the town of Seymour, but that's an exception, not what's usually happening in this instance. And so the way that I think that we can support you, at least for this activity for the time being, is showing you what the land uses are as they're defined in the new regulations, so that the subcommittee can read them and say, oh, I didn't think about including use X, but that's a really good use that we might want to include in the tax incentive policy. So that just helps ensure that the documents are consistent that way. We're providing additional recommendations that once you've just decided on your uses, if you tell us these are our high priority, these are our lower priority uses that we'd like to see the tax incentive policy for, we then can work either amongst ourselves as the land use department to be sure to see how they align with the current regulations, or if a commission the subcommittee wanted to come together and talk with us about that at another point. That's kind of moving further along the process once this has been adopted, put in the books. It's got First Selectman Dragonis' stamp of approval, but we're always thinking that way as planners. We're thinking about the next step, make it easy, make sure that everything's consistent. So I hope that clarifies.
Yes, thank you.
Of course. And then I think we had one more comment, and Keith, feel free to chime in and correct me if I'm wrong. Do you want to try to explain what I was talking about on page 5?
Well, give it a shot, and then I'll feed in there.
Sure.
Okay, we'll get there.
When I read the first or the second paragraph on page 5, where it talks about additionally, the Board of Selectmen on a case-by-case basis and dependent on qualifying factors may waive the building permit and other application fees in whole or in part. That part, totally fine with. It's when you get to the second area, and may provide in-kind services such as road widening, storm drainage improvements, sewer hookups, and similar improvements related to the development project at a reduced or no cost to an applicant. So from a land use perspective, when someone comes in and they're going to be making improvements to municipal property or town controlled property, when we receive a site plan, as Keith was talking about earlier, or we receive a special use permit, it will show on the map exactly what they're doing. So it'll show they're adding the sidewalk, or it'll show where they're putting the lamp posts, whatever it may be that it is done by private developers, but is for public benefit. And so where it says that these things may be provided in kind at a reduced or no cost to an applicant, my first question as someone who reviews site plans is, if it's not something that the applicant is paying for, they might not be inclined to put it on the site plan. They may not be inclined to kind of show where these things are going, which is fine if the town is doing it because the town's going to handle it. But when you get into this kind of reduced situation, all I would ask is that there's an additional sentence that says, like, built to the town's applicable standards, because there are state of Connecticut Department of Transportation standards when you're widening the road or you're doing things in the right of way. There's Department of Public Works standards when you're working on storm drainage improvements. It's just a little thing to be sure, no matter the partnership that the town gets into with an applicant, whether they're paying part of it or whatever it may be, that if they're going to put it on their site plans, they're doing it in the way we want them to. And those make sense, Keith? And
Yeah, yes,
Mr.
exactly.
We just
Exactly.
Okay, and then they would work with the land use folks, you guys, to make sure that built to the town's standards is followed through with, and you would share that with them. Okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
And that's where we get the fire marshal and the traffic, whomever needs to be involved with those levels of expertise. They're the ones who look at it, make sure we're all good.
Okay, thank you. I'm just writing, hold on. I don't do shorthand anymore.
May I ask a question for SN and Keith?
Absolutely.
How often do you guys work with planning and zoning to update your land use regulations? And I ask this because I want to make sure that if we eventually decide to set up our tax incentive regulation with land use in mind, are we going to be out of date if you guys run a more frequent schedule than we do?
Yeah, so I think we lost Keith, but ultimately, there's always an opportunity to provide a text amendment. And so they meet once a month, and when a municipality wants to put a text amendment on it, that could be as simple as First Selectman Dragonis telling us, meet back with the subcommittee, let's figure out the changes that we'd like to see made, and then we get it on the agenda. And so ultimately, when there's a modification to the zoning regulations, Keith brought this up earlier, that's one of those types of land use activities that has a higher level of discretionary requirements. So if we wanted to make changes, or we wanted to make sure that we did something that made it easier for people to use the uses in the tip, we'd modify our text, our zoning regulations, submit it as an application, it'd go for a public hearing, and I'd hope that someone from the subcommittee would attend just to kind of explain why the changes were made, and the commission would move from there.
Yep.
So it's always possible. I give you the long answer. I put my technical nerd cap on, but I like to explain the process so that everyone understands.
Madam Chairwoman, if I may.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure why we're discussing in-kind improvements by a potential developer or potential renovator of a property. That would be something that would be within the discretion of the land use department, planning and zoning, your review. I'm not sure why we're talking about that at this level, at this point, why we would incorporate any of that language in our ordinance.
Well, it's already there. That's why they're bringing it up.
I'm just don't know why it's there.
We could always decide to remove it.
Well, I don't know. We can talk about that. I think to me, it's just pointing out from a tax incentive. It does say it's on a case-by-case basis, and they're talking about qualifying factors that would have to be reviewed again. I believe land use, and then pulling in the other proper folks. It's talking about the possibility within the tax incentive plan based on those factors that there could be additional benefits to those improvements, such as waiving the building permit or application fees, or providing in part or in whole those in-kind services. I guess it depends on the, I don't want to say I guess, I mean, it is the project and it's talking about the qualifying factors. So I think it's just pointing out to anyone that's prospectively looking to make improvements or to do something where they might qualify for the tax incentive, that this is a possibility based on what qualifying factors they meet. Otherwise, I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Savannah, Nicole, it could be something that they then stop even considering making improvements because they don't even see it there as something as a potential on the table. Am I incorrect on that?
Yeah, and Keith, you chime in here
Yes.
too. Sometimes
Welcome back, Keith.
Yes,
it's I think you hit the nail on the
thank
head.
you. I dropped out. Boom, I'm back.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's case by case, because there can be instances in which a sewer hookup is very far away and can be cost prohibitive to a point where a developer says, no, I don't want to do that. And that might be an instance depending on the prospective benefits to the community that the town of Seymour may say, you know what, we really want this use, we really want this business, we're going to help connect them. I don't want to give a sweeping generalization here because it really is specific on a developer. It's very specific on what utilities, what things are close to them. I've been in communities where they require that you connect the sidewalk, and sometimes it leads to, or you have to make sidewalk, and it'll lead to, we call them ghost sidewalks, where they start at one property end and they end at the other, and there's no sidewalks around the rest of it. And so maybe it's close to a school and the town says, you know what, you build your sidewalk, we'll finish to the rest of it. So there's lots of these case by case instances in which a municipality may do exactly what you say here, but that's where our point is. If you do so, we just want to be sure that everyone knows they have to follow the standards.
Right, but I think to Fred's question and concern, the whole point in calling it out is to kind of incentivize them to don't give up just because you don't see something spelled out. We can explore it and give you an answer, and you can make your decision then. It's a potential possibility based on the qualifying factors. We just are calling it out that it can be discussed. It is available if they meet certain criteria. We wouldn't want to remove that entirely to create any, I don't want to say wrong, but we don't want to create the illusion that it's not even an option to discuss. Is that correct? That's why it's called out as an option, as a possibility.
Right.
Am I making
I
any
agree with
sense?
that.
All right.
With all due
Sometimes I
respect,
get there the long way.
with all due respect, I don't understand why this paragraph is in a tax incentive ordinance. I just don't understand why it's here. I think this is something that's left to the land use people to deal with, not us. If there's going to be road widening, that's not something that we take jurisdiction over. We're talking about tax incentives, not construction and development of the project. I just don't understand why that's even in this ordinance and why we need to further discuss it. That's my opinion.
If I may add one thing, and Keith, again, please correct me if I'm wrong. The Planning and Zoning Commission does not have the power to enter into an agreement with the developer to do these sorts of things. It would have to come from the Board of Selectmen, or it would have to come from a higher power that be in the community. And so my interpretation, and again, I'm only speaking from a land use perspective, is in line with the chairwoman's perspective that it tells people this is an option. Because if someone were to come to the Planning and Zoning Commission and ask for the town to connect them to the sewer, they'd say, the statute does not give us the power to do that for you.
And I understand that. I just don't understand why this is in a tax incentive ordinance. It should be elsewhere.
Where do you think it should be, Fred? I don't know. I'm asking sincerely. I might be wrong, but you already heard my perspective that it's here so people know that it's an option, and that if something does come in front of us, we have something to refer back to say, nope, it says on case by case, we can ask the right people what the qualifying factors are. If it's not in the tax incentive ordinance for the improvements that they're making, where would it, I don't know where else it would be. So I'm sincerely asking where you think it should be, if not in here.
In regulations promulgated by the Land Use Compliance Department, directing the developer or renovator to come to the Board of Selectmen to deal with these issues. This is not a tax incentive issue. It's an incentive to help the developer. I don't see it as a tax incentive issue.
I don't have any, I have to say, if I may, I don't have the expertise to say that's either yes or no, but I do know that when a private developer is developing land within a town, we as, let's just say as a Planning and Zoning Commission, cannot make them do more than what's necessary of off-site improvements. We can't make them do a boulevard that leads to their development, their commercial development. We can't do those things, but we can offer them, as I imagine it, this is not just a tax offer, it's an offer of in-kind services that makes their development shine even more, gives them the lighting around, gives them the municipal parking lot that's nearby, gives them the different kinds of things that makes the location proper and makes them want to be in the community even more based on that kind of development relationship. I don't know if this should go in here, but I see that as another tool in this incentive agreement that allows them to say, not only we're going to dive into this because we're getting some tax benefits, but we're also going to dive into it because we're going to get a beautiful, much more beautiful site, a much more accommodating site. Maybe there's going to be a mass transit place near more of where high density housing is. Maybe there'll be things like that. That would be my my guesstimate on that.
And I don't want to prolong the discussion. I understand what you're saying. I've represented developers who present their plan with in-kind services, widening of roads, lamps that are not required, but all that's presented usually at the land use level and doesn't come to get involved in a tax incentive program. I think that's something more that the Economic Development Commission would be dealing with, in my opinion.
Okay.
All right, we can discuss that at another time. We'll keep it. I have a note here on what they're recommending we add if we keep, and we can certainly, I was just quickly trying to flip through some, but I don't have enough time to do a good job of it to see if it's another.
Madam
Chairwoman, may I ask one question of Selectman Stanek very quickly?
Sure, it's an open forum. I run it pretty loose.
All right. Selectman Stanek, are you saying that land use, what we're discussing here, that the language that's in our tax incentive plan is generally understood to be, something that doesn't have to be pointed out here? In other words, it's understood when you go forward towards land use that these things are in play?
I think Fred's just saying he doesn't disagree with the statement. He just doesn't think it belongs in the tax incentive ordinance, and it should be in the land use, at the land use level in one of their documents.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand the layers.
Yes.
But we can continue.
And if I may ask another question,
Sure.
the land use folks, the planners, what do you think about B1, the inclusion of storage as a use for tax incentive?
I would say it would not be a priority item of the land use office for a downtown situation.
So we should consider removing that.
I did not say that.
I know you did not say that, but that would be our decision to recommend to the full
Okay.
board. But
Yeah.
it's something for us to consider.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
exactly.
And if I may just put it on the record, it wouldn't be the land use, it wouldn't be any land use regulation that would outline the area and section that might get removed. It would have to be something with the economic development commission, economic development director. That's outside of the purview of land use, and as Keith said, gets into impact fees and things that are not legal for land use commissions to request.
I understand.
Okay. Fred will explain it to me later, so I got it.
I just want to stay at this point, since we're talking through this document, I think we should remove storage from B1. I'll just put that on the record.
Okay.
And that's all we had. We like to stay in our lane and put on our land use hat when we're asked to do something.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. You did have, so Keith, you did have a pretty quick answer that storage should not be necessarily a priority. Is there anything on this list that either of you feel strongly about that we should take under advisement that should definitely be a priority, or another one that's not a priority? Again, understanding that the commercial marine is probably out of the question.
I would say just as quick as I said about storage, is that those remaining items are excellent choices. They produce multiplying types of economic development. They bring in all kinds of people at all kinds of hours. The mixed uses here are exactly what you want for either a downtown or a major commercial area, or even an industrial area as well. These are all good uses. We might be able to add a couple more, but I think the ones that you have are very good. That they're good choices.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the comment.
If I may
Yeah.
add, I'd like to commend that you have restaurants, family entertainment, hospitality, assisted living. You go beyond just the pure economic uses that would benefit the community. And you really are meeting what you say in your preamble about improving the quality of life for the community. So you want to bring the types of uses that not only benefit you from an economic perspective, but make Seymour a desirable, a wonderful place to live and be a part of the community in.
Okay, great. Thank you for the commentary. Chris or Fred, do you have any other questions that we might not have even touched upon or want clarification on?
I do not, but thank you very much, Savannah, Nicole, and Keith, for helping us this evening. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I don't think I have any questions from a land use perspective, so I thank you both for your time.
You're welcome.
Feel free
I
to
as well.
email us with anything.
Thank you. We very much appreciate you coming out tonight and sharing what you have.
Thank you. You're welcome.
You
Thank
can
you.
feel free to stay on or do what you may.
I'm going to continue watching the Husky game.
Okay, sounds like a better option.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so
And
much for your time.
let me also say, I am in the town hall on Tuesdays all day, and and Savannah, Nicole, and I are both in the town hall on Thursdays all day. And you can also find us probably sometime in between when we have zoning meetings as well. So we're available to meet with you anytime, even after work.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for that. Thank you
Yes.
both so much. Have a good evening and rest of your week.
You
Have a
too.
good
Thank you.
evening.
Bye-bye.
Best planners ever.
Okay. So, let's see. So first, Anne Marie, since we have you joining us, we want to find out if Bob's going to be able to continue on, because it's been pretty consistent. I think he's come to one meeting. We haven't really had that many, but I don't even hear if he's going to be able to attend or not. So I want to make sure he knows when we're meeting and he's going to be able to participate. So it's not just the three of us. More heads a little better sometimes.
Who else is on this committee, Trish? Just the
This
four
is
of you?
it. Me, Bob, Fred, and Chris.
Let me ask this question of you guys. Do you think it would make sense to have somebody from the land use committee on this?
We do that if this is a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, you could do that.
Prefer that question.
I mean, it's a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen, but you have 4 boards of selectmen, right? 4 select persons on this committee out of 7. So you can never, your votes would always end up even, or they'd end up in a tie. Right? It's a committee to move something forward, to make sure that we're doing what's best for the town and making sure that it's a fair in, you know.
Ideally, I would love to have somebody maybe from planning and zoning or land use, or, I mean, if we're talking about opening up this committee to outside personnel, I would love their input at least. You know, like Jim Zook would be incredible to have. Not only that, but he and, you know, another lawyer, somebody more who's also familiar with the laws like Fred is.
Listen, I'm not putting 2 lawyers on here. Mr. Stanek rules. That's it.
You're very kind, Madam First Selectwoman. However, I think it might be a good idea to have someone from the Board of Finance on this committee.
That's why I have Trish.
Okay.
She, you know, I mean, no offense, but Trish was on the Board of Finance, and she understands how that board operates well before she was on the Board of Selectmen. I mean, Trish is as conservative as they get, and that's not meant as any insult whatsoever. Trish's first goal is to look out for the town as well as our tax people, our residents, whenever we're looking at something. I was just thinking that, you know, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here. Is this a quorum? It's a subcommittee. It's okay. But I know Bob has not been able to make a couple meetings due to his new position. So maybe it's something we look at. Maybe we get somebody from land use on here in case we have any questions. I mean, Fred, those were very good points. I mean, to me, the road would add value. I don't know if I would use it as an incentive plan, but it, you know, to lead up to a very nice area, whether it's an industrial park or commerce park or a residential. But something we can think about, Trish. I mean, it's a lot for the 3 of you. And I know you others sit on other committees as well.
I operate as a team member. I'm chairing just to run the meeting. So I'm certainly not opposed to adding someone with more specialty that can look at it from that angle. Just like Mr. Stanek and Mr. Bowen stated, I wasn't aware we could add anybody that wasn't on the Board of Selectmen. So good.
No.
I mean, as long as you're stating that's okay, I'm
Let me just
fine with it
double-check
and think
that.
it makes sense.
Let me double check that. I mean,
I concur with Trish. I didn't think we could add somebody from outside this
'cause it
committee,
is a
but if
subcommittee, right?
or from outside the Board of Selectmen, but if we can, then
Well,
that's fantastic.
You've termed this as a committee of the Board of Selectmen. You can expand it. The Board of Selectmen could expand it to a committee, tax incentive committee, outside of being a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen. That
Yeah.
could be taken, you know,
Yeah.
action taken.
Right,
Yeah, 'cause
that's
that was
where I'm
the
just
issue.
saying, let's make sure that if we set it up, it's done correctly. If we can add someone without changing it, great, that keeps it easy, but you want to just look into that, Anne Marie, to make sure it's set up properly if we do add
Yeah,
someone.
because I do want to point out that the whole, I'm sorry, Trish, I didn't mean to cut you off there. The whole reason we lost Rob was because this was a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen and he's no longer on the board.
Yeah,
All right, let me look into making it just a tax incentive committee and not the tax incentive committee, a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen.
And
okay,
in my opinion, if it was a separate committee, then the findings and the report of that committee would go to the ordinance committee of the Board of Selectmen, and the ordinance committee would then recommend to the full board to pass the product. That's my opinion.
Stephen, are you making notes for that?
I am.
Thank you. And Stephen, put it on the agenda for Tuesday as well. We can discuss it on Tuesday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, yeah. Look, if you can do that for us, Anne Marie, look into that. That would be good. Because I think the three of us would find it helpful.
Well, and it just gets more input from somebody, and it's not looked upon as the Board of Selectmen are just putting in stuff that they want to put in, right? It's input from somebody who works. As we know, our positions are elected. We can be here in 2 years, we could be here 6 years, we could be here 10 years. But somebody who's an employee of the town deals with it day in and day out, and they get paid to do that, whereas you guys are volunteers.
Okay, so let us know what you find out, please, and then
All right.
how we've got to reset up or reconvene and start all over.
Thank you.
Again. All right. So just kind of in line with the discussion of possible changes to the tax incentive program. So Fred, I do appreciate your comments. I'm thinking about them because if they don't belong here, they don't belong here. We just want to make sure that the in-kind services are, if we remove them from here, we are sure that as we're recommending that change at the same time, they're getting added somewhere else. So we don't have this gap for any period of time where it's completely removed, right? That's my opinion, how we should handle that. I do want to go back and just look and see. I didn't know if it was appropriate to ask them, so I did not ask Keith or Savannah Nicole, but I didn't even think, because I wouldn't have, to ask about that not being in this particular ordinance. So I was just, like I said, trying to flip through to see if it's a common item that is in other town ordinances. Doesn't mean we have to follow suit, of course, just trying to, and trusting your judgment, Fred. I just want to make sure that it's someplace for the Board of Selectmen to refer to and say it's a possibility, and for anyone applying for something to be aware of when they're talking to the right people. So I'd like to look, I'm going to look into that until our next meeting, just to see if it is anywhere. And then Fred, within the town of Seymour, I don't know if the EDC really has anything that would be including it anywhere, but maybe Sheila, maybe we can ask Sheila if there's anything that she sees that's inclusive in Seymour's economic development, or is she making changes or doing a complete new write-up, Anne Marie? For Seymour?
You're on mute.
He's making some changes.
Okay, so we can ask, at minimum, we can go back to Sheila and ask if it's appropriate, and, maybe better for her to add into her documents. And that way we can just, it can be cross-referenced. Would that work for you both, Chris and Fred?
I was going to ask if we were going to be able to get her to speak to the subcommittee as it is, just to get her input on what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm definitely in favor of that.
I think she was waiting for you guys to meet first, and then come in and speak.
Okay.
I know we still want to speak with Jim Baldwin and Joe Kuziak as well. This is where we started. We probably could have gotten them in tonight too, but I think we were all concerned it might take up too much time, and I'm not looking to keep people out till,
Yeah,
9, 10 o'clock.
they're preparing for Monday in Thursday's meeting. We have a
Yeah. Fred, would that be okay with you though? We'll look into that.
I think Sheila's input is very important. I think her input is probably the most important with regard to the revision of this tax incentive ordinance and bringing development into town. As far as the issues that I raised, I'm not really invested in whether that paragraph needs to be in this document or not. I was just asking the land use people, since they addressed it.
Yeah. Okay. So when we meet with Sheila, we'll ask her, because it's evident the land use folks said it's inappropriate for them and illegal for them to have anything in there. So certainly.
I mean, when we talk about stormwater drainage, for example, there's a separate stormwater drainage ordinance that deals with matters of that nature. So I just think some of that is dealt with elsewhere. But, I have no problem with it remaining here. was just asking the experts that we're bringing in about it. So I don't want to make a big issue about it.
Sure
But-
you do. No, it's okay. It's okay. No, raise the questions because that's why I told you I thought you'd be very beneficial on this committee because I wouldn't have even thought to ask it.
I'd like to make a larger issue about removing storage from B1.
Again, huh? Very strong. So I'm not opposed to moving the storage, but what's the, I'm just curious, is it, what's the big deal about the storage? You don't want any, is it just that we have so little space, we don't want to use any of it for something of that nature and we want to get something more, but what is?
Storage facilities are not a large tax generator, for one thing. Number
So-
two, they're unsightly. I mean, they're necessary, and I don't think that we should see them in a downtown area. That's all.
And his application is going in front of inland wetlands and the board Thursday. So Trish, just to let you know where Housatonic Wire is. The one that burnt down next to the old Seymour lumber. He is putting an application in to put his storage units there.
Wow.
And he wants a
Oh,
7
that's so
million.
busy.
Huh?
That's such a busy location.
Do you, is that what you want to see when you're coming down Route 8?
Well, no.
Okay. Do
Already
you
have
want to
storage.
see that? Do you want to see that in a downtown area? I can see on Derby Avenue, over by Clean Harbor.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I mean, I wasn't necessarily, that was my question. I'm looking at this kind of like overall as what we can do in town, period. Maybe it's more of, but yeah, I don't think every item listed here is appropriate for necessarily downtown.
Well, he's looking to come in front of he's gonna come in front of the Board of Selectmen because he told his partner that his partner's investing $7 million into it and that he would get a $7 million tax incentive. I almost fell off my chair when I heard that. I said, that's not happening because we have to base our incentives off what is going to make the town money. A storage unit really is not taxable. A storage unit is not going to bring in any income and it's only going to employ one person.
Okay, thank you.
Those statements, I can tell you in the brief time that I was on planning and zoning, between when Kurt appointed me to the board and when I won my seat on this board, we had at least 3 applications for site plans in front of us on that board. And the main reason is because, they fit the zoning laws and they don't employ anybody. We have an employment.
And it was all for storage, Chris? Really? This is how far removed I am from this element.
3
of
separate
the-
applications for storage facilities, in addition to what we already have, because I'm pretty sure we still have the storage when you're driving on Route 8 southbound, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so they were talking about putting one a little bit behind that, closer to the Beacon Falls line. That's the first one that comes to mind, but there were 2 others that didn't really get off the ground.
Okay, I
So
got my
I-
answer. Thank you.
I
So,
100% concur with Mr. Stanek in regards to removing that from the tax incentive, because in the tax incentive plan, if you look on page 3, section 4, paragraph B, and this kind of pivots into one of the points that I wanted to make. We have a Seymour employee provision in this plan. They're not going to employ enough people to even hit $100,000, let
okay,
alone people residing in Seymour.
okay. Nope, I got my answer. I didn't know any of this. Again, not something I have had any involvement in the past, so thank you all for the clarification.
And if I may just follow up, I wasn't aware that there was a storage facility application pending for the property that the first selectwoman identified. I heard a rumor that might be coming down the road. I'm not talking about that application. I'm just talking about storage facilities in general.
In general, okay.
With
So-
regard
Within
with
2
regard to
years.
the tax incentive program.
Right. So I have a question. Is it appropriate? Well, probably not. I was going to ask if it's appropriate to just look at that one section since it's the preamble and purpose and under the realm of ensuring that applications are meeting what we desire, can this committee put in a recommendation to remove the, oh, that's under B, hold on.
B1.
Under B1 to remove the commercial marina and as well as the storage.
Well, at this point, if there's a pending application by a storage facility developer, I don't think we should be touching this right now. We should not be
Okay,
amending the application.
so we can still prioritize,
Right, I just think we should leave it alone right now if there's a pending application.
and there
Well,
is a
Stan, it
pending
would.
application.
Okay. And we should leave it alone right now.
I have a question. Could we remove it and potentially grandfather other applications that were made on prior versions?
I don't want
In
to
other words-
grandfather it because we have the right, I believe, to discuss in the Board of Selectmen and prioritize the use, such as the land use folks had said. So I don't want to grandfather anybody because that kind of sounds like we're going to strongly consider, and we don't know that.
Okay,
We have I think, and Mr. Stanek or Anne Marie can correct me if I'm speaking out of line, but I think at that point, we just leave it and then discuss the priority of the application based on location, tax revenue, and the rest of the qualifying factors, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's see, Stephen, you took good notes, right? On
I did.
everything? Because I took good notes, but I'm telling you right now, when I go to read them in 2 months, I'll be able to read them and I've got to decipher them into nice, a nice summary. So if you could, I know we're not required, but I'd prefer the minutes to include those conversations relatively
Sure.
as we reviewed. Does anybody, so let's see, for the next meeting, is it for our next meeting, can we get Jim and Joe, or shall we? Is that a good time to ask if they can join us? And if not, then we can ask Sheila.
I would think let's prioritize Joe and Jim because Sheila, we can bring in another, a little bit later in the process.
Well, right, I'm
After-
asking if they're available. I don't want to slow us down if not. And in the
I
meantime,
see.
we might even be kind of regrouping if, once Anne Marie gets an answer to how the committee's going to be set up, just have to bring a couple of folks up to date too. So Stephen, what are your thoughts?
There's all three, the planners, Joe, and Jim were all available this evening. I chose the planners because they also work with other towns. So they might be the most difficult to schedule in the future, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't do Joe and Jim in the same night.
Okay, is that good?
Or Sheila.
Is that good, Fred and Chris?
I concur.
Okay. I know it's a little slow going, but I think the smart thing to do is some information gathering while we make sure we're organized correctly. Hopefully, we get someone from someone who has a little bit more meat in the game here as an employee, as Anne Marie stated, or is involved every day. So once we've got all of the organizational material, we can then focus on what those changes are going to be. Is that agreeable to everybody?
I concur.
Can I add a few things, if you don't mind?
Sure.
There's some helpful literature that exists on the efficacy of tax incentive plans and the cost of them. The prolonged unexpected cost of them. I can send that your way if you might find that useful. The other thing might be if there's a special meeting to try to get Sheila in, because I think an opportunity for this plan might include some kind of grant fund or some kind of business support, existing business support. And the other thing is
So you would want us to meet with Sheila as a special meeting rather than waiting another cycle for the meeting? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
It's a suggestion.
Okay,
You know, because if we, that's something that the board would be interested in, or the subcommittee would be interested in, you know, that something like that kind of needs to get the ball rolling, as opposed to having that idea wait 3 or 4 months in, if you're trying to
Okay.
deliver something by like the end of the calendar year.
all right. We'll discuss at the next meeting. So we'll meet with, we'll get Joe and Jim in, and then we'll talk after that about possibly a special meeting to get Sheila in. Does that work?
Certainly.
Yes.
That way everyone's got a bit of a heads up about the special meeting. I hate to overwhelm people with too much, with no lead. That's all, unless we have to on an urgent matter. Okay. Does anyone have anything else that they want to share, or anything that they're dissatisfied with thus far? Again, I realize this is slow going to start.
I figure as long as we keep having quorums for meetings and we don't miss meetings, we're doing very well, because it's slow going right now, but at the very least, slow going at the beginning of our terms in our seat. Whereas this board was commissioned right around election time, meaning we were slowed down because we lost a member. So this is actually a good approach going forward, because we can get all our information and make substantive changes as we see fit with time to spare, so long as we keep the momentum going.
Right. I don't disagree, but I'm always open to hearing others' ideas if they have a better process in mind or they think will work. So Mr. Stanek, if you concur as well that we're doing okay and have a good plan going forward, then I'm happy.
Well, I really think that Sheila's input is going to be the most important outside person to this committee. That's what I think.
Well,
She's experienced in this area, and I think it's
Yeah.
going to be the most important.
and we'll meet with her. Like I said, we can discuss a special meeting after our next meeting. My thought process in meeting with Joe and Jim first, though, is we've met with Keith and Savannah and Nicole. We can meet with them, and any questions we have on feedback they've given us, we can share with her, also go through Sheila to kind of bring all of that together from an economic development standpoint.
I have no problem with that. I just think, we're like a rocket ship taking off. We're just taking off. We're going slow. But once we get to the point that Sheila interjects into this committee, I think we will take off into outer space. That's what I think.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right. And this isn't any different, I will tell you, than how strategic planning worked. When I started that committee, I'm not kidding you when I tell you it was, and I don't think it'll take that long for us, but it must have been 7-8 months before I finally hit a chip and everybody kind of clicked and got it, and we were able to plow ahead. So I think we've just all got to get there, and we're also new to kind of reviewing this and hearing what everyone has to say. So I appreciate everyone's feedback. Always reach out to me or speak up at a meeting. I'm not easily offended at all if there is something you want to see done differently, or if you have an idea you want to try that might help propel us even more. Okay. Does anybody have anything else? Anne Marie, I know you joined us. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about, or you were hoping we were going to talk about and share?
No, I was just in my office and said, let me get into this meeting.
Okay. So
All our meetings are going live next week, by the way.
So we're going to be meeting in person next Tuesday?
Yes.
Very well.
on Tuesday, we're meeting in person. Okay. Okay, so I know on the agenda, it's discussion of possible changes to Seymour's tax incentive plan. I think I've heard loud and clear, and I'm on board with removing storage. I'm still disappointed in not having this marina, but hey, but we'll get on to, I think, really making changes after we have some feedback, but it's good as we go along to make those comments that kind of will really resonate and stick with us later when we go to discuss what we know we're changing easily enough before we get into some of the more potentially complicated items. Hopefully Sheila, like Fred said, will be able to help us with as far as economic development vision for Seymour. if there is nothing else from anybody, silence is golden. I will take a motion to adjourn. Oh, Chris, go ahead.
Motion to adjourn.
And I will second the motion.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Aye.
Mm,
Thank
I
you,
wanna-
everybody, for joining tonight. I appreciate it. It was a solid hour. Thank you all. We'll try and keep it to that going forward, hour and a half, okay? So
I just want to note that yesterday, Little League took 3.5 hours. I am very thankful for an hour.
Well, that was more fun than the tax incentive plan. All right.
Not at 3.5 hours.
Thanks, everybody. I'll
Good
see
night,
you
everyone.
Tuesday
Thank you.
night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Right.